So let's get right into it. What if I told you that one of the biggest geopolitical crises of our time actually kicked off with a rushed detour to an airport, a handshake under pressure, and a promise that, well, was basically designed to be broken? What if an entire nation's fate was sealed just because a US president wanted a signature, and he wanted it, like, yesterday?
And what if that exact same playbook, the one that tricked a country out of its ultimate defense 30 years ago, is being dusted off and used on them again right now? This is the story of Ukraine, the nuclear shield they were convinced to give up, and the impossible choice they're facing today. It really makes you wonder, can a nation be deceived twice?
So our story really starts back in 1994 with a promise that would end up being shattered. President Bill Clinton was on a mission that would completely redraw the lines of global power. He was determined to disarm Ukraine.
I mean, just look at how fast this all went down. On January 8th, Clinton gets on Air Force One. Just a few days later, after a secret, high-stakes meeting in Kyiv, Ukraine is signing away its entire nuclear future in Moscow. By December, it's all wrapped up in something called the Budapest Memorandum. It was a complete whirlwind that changed everything for Ukraine.
And we're not talking about a couple of old missiles here. When the Soviet Union collapsed, Ukraine inherited more than 1,800 nuclear warheads. Just let that number sink in for a second. We're talking intercontinental ballistic missiles, the kind that can fly from one side of the planet to the other.
That arsenal, pretty much overnight, made Ukraine the world's third largest nuclear power. Now, if you're a country that shares a border with Russia, these things aren't just weapons. They're a shield. They're an absolute guarantee that no one, especially not Moscow, is ever going to mess with you. But both Washington and Moscow wanted them gone.
The pressure all came to a head in this secret meeting at the Kyiv airport. Clinton made an unscheduled stop, claiming it was for refueling. But really, he was there to make sure the Ukrainian president, Kravchuk, didn't get cold feet. According to Stroba Talbot, who was there, the message was brutally simple. They basically dropped all the diplomatic niceties and told him, sign the deal or you are completely on your own. 2 days later, he signed.
And just like that, the shield was gone. Ukraine started dismantling its entire nuclear deterrent. So what did they get in return for this massive sacrifice? Well, this is where the story gets really twisted, and it all comes down to the fine print. The whole thing hinged on the difference between two little words. Ukraine wanted guarantees, a rock-solid, legally binding pact that would force the US and the UK to come to their defense if Russia ever attacked. But what they got were assurances, a vague political promise with absolutely no military teeth. It was a promise that meant, well, nothing, really. And the consequences of that weak language became tragically clear. By 94, Ukraine is nuclear-free. Fast forward 20 years to 2014, and Russia invades and just takes Crimea. Then in 2022, they launch a full-scale war. Those assurances from the Budapest Memorandum, they turned out to be completely worthless.
It took decades, but Bill Clinton finally admitted it was a huge mistake. He was on Irish television in 2023, and he said, "I feel a personal responsibility." He basically acknowledged that he was wrong and that Ukraine was right to be so nervous. But, an apology like that, it came 28 years too late.
And that's why this whole story matters so much right now. Because with this really eerie sense of déjà vu, it feels like history is repeating itself. We're seeing an echo of the exact same power play from 30 years ago.
See, now there's this new proposal floating around, unofficially being called the 28-point plan. It's a supposed peace deal, but it's reportedly being pushed not by official diplomats, but by figures tied to a potential future U.S. administration. And it puts Ukraine right back in that same old, familiar, and terrifying position, being asked to trust a promise in exchange for giving up things they can never get back.
And the terms of this deal are, well, they're staggering. Ukraine would have to just hand over Crimea, Donetsk, and Luhansk to Russia. It would be permanently banned from ever joining NATO. In return, Russia gets welcomed back into the global economy with a total amnesty for all war crimes. And Ukraine gets rebuilt with frozen Russian assets, but the plan suggests the U.S. would get to keep half the profits.
This proposal was so heavily tilted in Russia's favor that, according to the Wall Street Journal, some analysts were joking that it must have been written by Vladimir Putin himself. It's a plan that rewards the aggressor and demands the victim sacrifice land, sovereignty, and any hope for justice.
So, all of this sets up a final, agonizing choice for Ukraine. It's a choice between trusting yet another promise or facing some absolutely devastating consequences.
And this gets us right to the heart of Ukraine's real dilemma today. They're once again being asked to trade something tangible, their own security and territory, for a piece of paper, a deal brokered by an outside power, with all the massive risks that come with it.
So Ukraine is now staring down two awful options. They can accept a peace deal that, frankly, feels like a trap, one that rewards Russia and leaves them forever vulnerable. Or they can refuse the deal and risk losing critical American support, which could mean being left to fight this war all alone.
It's just impossible to look at this situation without that history looming over it. 30 years ago, Ukraine gave up the world's third largest nuclear arsenal because America looked them in the eye and said, "Trust us."
So after being burned so badly by those empty assurances back in 1994, the real fundamental question is this: will Ukraine let itself be pressured into a similar kind of deal today? Is history really about to repeat itself?
Because, this story goes way beyond just one country. It's about global power, it's about the future of security in Europe, and it's about whether smaller democracies can ever really, truly rely on the promises of superpowers, or if they're all just pawns in a much, much bigger game.
And that's really the question we want to leave you with. In a world of shifting alliances and political games, when a superpower makes a promise to a smaller nation, is it actually worth the paper it's written on? Or is trust simply the price you pay right before the betrayal?